Welcome to What's the Big Idea, Joe Hudson.
Pleasure to be here, man.
Man, I'm really excited to have this conversation. And one of my favorite aspects of your work is this idea of following our enjoyment.
Yeah.
And so when it comes to conversations like this, of which you're doing a lot these days, what helps you to maximize your enjoyment?
Oh, that's a great question. Wow, I was not expecting that question. That's great. So mostly it's a feeling of connection, both with myself and with the person I'm speaking to. If I don't feel connected, which is a rare thing, but then something needs to be done to address and create the connection. So that is like an imperative for my enjoyment. If I don't feel connected, I'm not enjoying things. The other thing is I love interesting conversations. I love making sure that like a conversation doesn't go exactly where it's expected to go, that it's not standard. That also is exciting for me. I love meeting new people. So this is like podcasting and talking to people is one of the easiest things for me to enjoy. So it's not too much of a challenge.
So you talk about that connection really being kind of like that anchor.
Yeah.
How do you create that, or how do you do that?
Well, if you do an experiment, like right now, if you're listening to this, or you right now, and I just asked the question, how do you become 10% more connected? Right?
Looking in your eyes was like one, you're holding like eye contact, and I was like, oh, that feels nice. Like, let's do that.
Yeah, exactly. Feeling into my body, feeling into my internal experience would be another way that I, like if I just think about like 10%. But what I notice is if I can say that to anybody, and everybody has the ability to just actually become 10% more connected in this moment. And so that's the interesting thing is that you get a lot of questions in my business about like, how do I feel, or how do I get more connected? Yeah. And I often try not to answer the question, instead ask the question like I did with you, or some question like that, because everybody actually has access. It's our human right to know how to enjoy ourselves 10% more, or how to connect 10% more. And as soon as you realize that, then you realize, oh, this is a choice I get to make anytime.
Yeah. Very cool. Yeah. So I just invite the listeners to the podcast of like, as you're taking this in, how could you connect 10% more to Joe and I, and just like considering what comes up for you? Yeah. And I love that. And we'll talk more about it, but that idea of framing it as an experiment of just like, try it on, right? Like embodied wisdom versus a thought or an idea.
Yeah. And I would say that there's going to be a percentage of the viewers or listeners who will have resistance with the idea of connecting with us 10% more, just because of, avoidant attachment issues. So I would say if that doesn't appeal to you, then just connect with yourself 10% more in this. Because the reality is my ability to connect with you doesn't require you at all. You could be yelling at me and I can feel fully connected with you. You could be happy with me. I could feel fully connected with you.
Yeah. So you talked about one aspect of connection being that checking in with your like internal state. Yeah. If you were to make that real for the people who are watching this, like, what does that sound like if you were to do that in this moment? Like, what's going on for you internally?
Oh, wow, this is such a hard thing to put words to. So in this moment, what's happening in so there's two things that I think about, and then I'll do it. Yeah. But there's two things that I think about. If you're looking to calm the nervous system, then feeling the external part of your experience, meaning from your skin outward, that really can calm your nervous system. If you go into the internal experience, it can actually make regulation of the nervous system hard depending on what you're feeling. Sometimes it's very calming, and sometimes it can actually throw somebody. Yeah. And so if you're looking to make great decisions, if you are in a place where you feel compromised, then going to the external experience, coming to your senses, like what am I looking, how am I hearing, going outward, actually really calms. Because what's happening there is that trauma is us going back into the past, right? So if a guy is in Fallujah and experienced a whole bunch of trauma there, and then he's in Ohio and a car backfires, he's not in Ohio anymore. He's back in Fallujah, right? And that's the same thing that happens to us when we're not regulated. And so coming to your senses puts you in the present. The internal experience, however, could still be Fallujah. And so that might actually change your regulation in the opposite direction. So I just say that for anybody who's who's thinking about connection, because sometimes it's much easier to find connection through coming to your senses externally than it is internally, than it is a proprioception thing. From my experience in this moment, if I'm in touch with my body, there's always, I think it was Lowen who said this, but there's always a movement, a sensation in the body. And so if I'm paying attention to the movement, a sensation in my body, that's his definition of pleasure. And I find that to be really true. If I'm just paying attention to how sensation in my body is moving right now, it's just really,
I noticed as you were saying that, I did it and I just started to smile.
Yeah, I saw that too.
With that. Very cool, man.
Yeah. So which is, I think, a really critical thing, because if you're trying to heal your system, right? There's 3 heals. Heals maybe not the right word, but we'll use it for now. There's the head and the heart and the gut. So I think about it as 3 different brains, or 3 different modalities of transformation. So the head is the human brain. It is the prefrontal cortex. It's our thought.
Yeah.
The heart is the emotional. It's the mammalian. It is what moves us. It's what makes our decisions. And neurologically speaking, it's what makes our decisions. And then the nervous system is the reptilian brain. And so if you're going to have transformation, you need to actually address all 3 of those things. Sure. And the nervous system part of it, pleasure is the antidote. So the more you can actually be in pleasure in life, then the more that healing is possible, or transformation is possible. Because typically what's happening is the negative self-talk in our head is constantly attacking us, and the nervous system is constantly waiting for the fight. And so it's like jolty around. And so the pleasure actually lets the system know that it's safe. And when we feel safe, we learn better. Totally. We transform more. So it's not just like a party trick. It's actually really an important part of the healing process.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, today I'm excited to focus on decision making.
Oh, cool.
And how to make great decisions.
Okay.
But I asked you that question about like, what is something that you do that makes conversations like this enjoyable? Yeah. And Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, author of Flow, has this great idea of like a clear goal loosely held, right? Of like, so to get there, and like, so that people walk away from this episode with like a clear framework of just like, how do we make great decisions? What gets in the way? Yeah. But I'd love to start by just understanding what have been maybe one of the best decisions you've ever made, and what's been one of the hardest decisions you've ever made.
Best decision I ever made was marrying my wife, like bar none.
What's her name?
Tara.
Cool.
Yeah.
How long have you been together?
26 years.
Cool.
Yeah. And followed by having kids, which is actually, if she hears this, she'll smile and probably cry at the same time. But the hardest decision was not having a 3rd kid. That the recognition that I wasn't going to be able to do that and be the husband or the father that I wanted to be, when she very much wanted a 3rd kid. And that was a challenge.
I have goosebumps over my whole body, because that is probably one of the biggest decisions in my life that I haven't made.
Having a kid.
Having a 3rd kid.
Oh, having a 3rd kid.
Like, honestly, I almost like feel like I'm crying right now, because I knew I wanted to ask you that question.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about what that would be for me. And the answer that I came up with in my mind of what is like the decision I haven't made yet. Yeah. Wasn't that one, but actually whether or not I want to have a 3rd kid, and my partner does want to have a 3rd kid. Right. And I've been very clear that I don't want to have a 3rd kid. Yeah. But now I kind of do want to have a 3rd kid. And so I'm like very much in that question. Yeah. So how did you make that decision?
So luckily when the 3rd kid decision came, let's make a semantic difference. It's going to be arbitrary, but we'll make a semantic difference. Mm-hmm. A choice is something that you and I have made 1,000 of in this conversation already, or 100 of. And what words am I going to say right now? These are all choices, but they're not decisions. Yeah. Because I'm not deliberating. It's just occurring. So if you're making a decision, it means you're already in fear. It means there's already something that you're scared will or won't happen. Sure. And so I was lucky enough that when it came to the 3rd kid, I just never had a yes. So it was hard for me because I want my wife to be happy and have everything she wants in life. Like that's the nature.
Yeah.
I also don't want to, I'm not responsible for her happiness. That would be the death of our marriage if I felt that way. So, but it was just always very clear, like, oh, I'm not going to be able to do this. I'm not going to be able to be the dad and the husband that I want to be with more weight. And that was in a very much a particularly time and place for us, because it was, you know, I was in my venture capital career. I was the only person supporting the family.
Yeah.
You know, there was already a lot of like tension in just the way of life. And so I was too overwhelmed to do it in the way that I could. So,
and if you're
today, if like my situation was as it is now, I would probably be like, yeah, let's have a third kid, because that sounds super fun.
Yeah.
But I'm in a different place now.
Yeah. And I'm curious, did she want a third kid?
Oh yeah.
She really
not
did.
just not want, like really wanted. Yeah. Like never seen her fight for something as much.
Yeah. Well, you know, maybe that's a cool touch point to talk about, like being comfortable making a decision that upsets someone else.
Yeah.
And our aversion to that.
Yeah.
Could you say a little more about like how important that aspect of making good decisions is? It's like the willingness to like upset someone, or?
Yeah. So typically the way I would say it is that, so the way the brain works that we know, and that if you want to geek out on it, there's a book called Descartes' Error by a neuroscientist. I think it was like way back 2008 or 2012 or something. And what it says is that we make emotional decisions. So if I went inside of your brain and I turned off your emotional center of your brain, your IQ would be the same, but it would take you an hour or two to decide where to have lunch or what color pen to use. And so we know that that's what we do. And you can think about it. It's hard sometimes for people to grok. So just think about how many decisions you've made to be happy, or to not feel like a failure, or to impress somebody, or, you know, we're making all of our decisions that way.
Yeah.
And so you're not really actually worried about offending somebody. What's actually happening, or making somebody pissed, is what you're actually worried about is the emotional experience of that. Right? So if I said to you, like most high achievers, they say at some point they're worried, like it's all going to go to hell and I'm going to be homeless, right? But if I said to them, I guarantee, and they believed me, I guarantee you that you're going to be happier than you've ever been. It's going to be the best time of your life being homeless. It's going to be amazing, and you're going to feel so much love and connection for the whole world, and you're going to have these great relationships. Is homeless that scary? So the scary is the emotional experience that we are projecting into the future. And so the problem with that is that the emotional experience that we're avoiding is the one that we're inviting in the exact way we're avoiding it. So if I don't want to be, if I don't want to feel abandoned, this is my personal story. So in my 20s, I didn't want to feel abandoned.
Yeah.
And what happened was every time I started to feel abandoned, I would either get really hard, like, fine then, fuck off, or I would get needy. What can I do? Both make people abandon me. Yeah. And so nobody wants to be around, not very many people want to be around a needy person or an asshole. And I was going to be one or the other. And so I would create the abandonment in the exact way I was trying to avoid it. Yeah. And so if you're trying to avoid that experience by not speaking your truth, you're inviting the exact thing that you don't want. Yeah. Also, you're not being yourself, so you can't create a world that's meant for you, right? Yeah. So if I go out into the world and I'm like, I'm going to speak my truth, I'm going to be myself, then the people who like me. They don't like the thing I'm trying to pretend to be. The world that I create is created for me. The things that I'm choosing to do and that are choosing to invite me are things that are inviting me, not the person I'm trying to be. So if you're not making a decision because you're scared of hurting somebody, or scared of them getting mad, or scared that you're going to break them, or whatever that is, you're basically creating a world for somebody that you have to pretend to be. Yeah. And that there's no recipe in happiness for that.
Totally. And so where that naturally leads me is, if we are not making a decision to avoid something, how do we shift into the mindset of making a decision for something?
Oh, fascinating. I don't ever think about, it's not exactly how my system works as far as like, how do I, it's interesting. So I have goals, and in general, I achieve those goals. But I set it's like almost a set and forget for me on the goals.
Yeah.
For me, it's much more about living by principle.
Yeah.
And if I live by principle, my life is better than any goal that I could even imagine, is how it works. So I don't really say, this is the world I want to see. There's some of that. There's a little bit of that. And I'll set it and I'll forget it. Like I'll like, oh, that's a cool idea.
Yeah.
But what happens is life always provides something better than I could have imagined.
Yeah.
And the way that that works is because I live by a set of principles and I make decisions by those principles. So 80% of what I do is going to be a decision made by those principles. Occasionally, I have to wrestle with it a little bit or see something, and then either my principles change or I understand my principles more deeply. More likely the second one.
And I love the semantics on this show. And so when you say principles, what do you mean?
So principles are they're like values, except for you can take action on them. So values often aren't actionable, and so the distinction would be that principles you can take action on. So for instance, one of my principles we've talked about already is connection. So connection is one of the principles that I would have.
Yeah.
And so what does that mean? It means if I'm thinking about how to market, I market. One of the Occam's razors I'm going to go through is, how do I connect with my audience? How do I feel connected marketing?
Yeah.
If I'm having a disgruntled employee, how do we connect? If there's a meeting, we start off with connection. So it's I'm going to do that all the way down.
Yeah.
And so it helps me make a decision. It helps me shows me what the next action to take is. And then I like to present this as there's 5 or 7 maybe tops principles that you're living by. So you should really be able to hone it down.
Totally.
And when you look at those, you think, oh, if I live by those principles, actually, it might not be comfortable. I might have moments of, oh shit. I might have moments of pucker, but I know that that's going to actually lead me to a great life. I know that that's going to give me the life that I want.
Yeah.
And so that's how I think about principles, is that it helps you take actions, and you know that if you live by them, and then all of a sudden, if you do have a decision, if you are in that moment of, do I do this or do I do that?
Yeah. There's
a little bit of fear rising. You're acting by principles, not by trying to manage the situation or manage the outcome, because we can't manage the outcome. I could have let's say I wanted to sell you a car, and my whole livelihood is based on selling you a car.
Yeah.
Like if you drank coffee that morning or didn't drink coffee that morning might be the difference between me selling you the car, no matter what I do.
Sure.
No matter how I show up. It's going to be based on like your blood sugar potentially. So like I don't have actual control over the outcome, but I do have control over the way that I show up. And if I show up in a consistent way, then the outcome over time, it's like a portfolio of decisions. Ends up in the right place.
So 2 follow-up questions there, which is number 1, what is your differentiation of values and principles, just to clarify?
Yeah, values I find are often things that you can't make decisions by. So for instance, a value would be tell the truth or be honest. It's like, yeah, it's not going to really help you make a decision. Yes, it's a good 1 out of 100 times when you're thinking about lying, you go, nah, I'm not going to lie because I'm going to be honest.
Yeah.
But that's not actually going to help you decide what car to buy. It's not going to help you decide who your investment advisor is going to be. It's not going to help you decide if you're going to fire the COO or not.
Yeah.
So a value is like a way that you want to live, but it doesn't help you make the decisions.
Yeah. And then if you were to define what a principle is something that helps you to take aligned action.
Exactly. Yeah, that's a great way.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
I think a corollary that I often think of with CEOs or founders is just that if you're aiming to build culture, one of the first things you would do is create company values. How do we operate here? What are the behaviors that we celebrate?
Yeah.
But so often if you just look at that on an individual basis, and we don't have an answer to that question, right?
Yeah, so I do the same thing, but I'll do it with principles, not with values.
Yeah, totally.
And the way that we do it is, so typically the way like a value creation is done is some people sit around a table, they agreed kind of on the values. There's some discussion, and then these are the values, and then they're put up and forgotten about. Typically, like in a company, that's how it works. And the way that we'll do principles is, when I'm inside of a company, is we will, everybody will be asked the question, what are the 5 things that if we do, we will be successful?
Yeah.
And how to, and they should be able to decide, these 5 things should be able to decide 80% of the things that you deal with on a daily basis. And then everybody presents what they think they should be. And then the leader of the organization, they wrestle with it together. And then the leadership of the organization comes up with it.
Yeah.
And then that's given to the entire company, and they run experiments on each principle. They like, oh, this week we are going to make decisions based on this principle, and then we're going to report, did it work or did it not work?
Yeah.
And that lets people refine them and understand them better and be educated on them, or educate people on them. And then when all that's done, then they go back and say, okay, maybe we need to change the principles a little bit.
Yeah.
And then that kind of a process happens regularly, where there's a regularly wrestling with the principles.
Yeah.
Where people are experimenting with them, because that's the other thing, is values often, it's like this thing in the background because they're not relevant to your everyday.
Sure.
And so then when I'm in companies, oftentimes people will like make special emojis for each of the principles, or it comes up in conversation. One of the CEOs that I work with, they have a principle called open the drawer, which means we talk about shit.
Yeah.
And if you're in a meeting, it would be surprising not to hear somebody during every meeting go, let's open the drawer on that.
Yeah.
And so that's the other thing. And if you're working in principles, it's also really good to make them really catchy, like to have like good marketing in your principles.
So principles, you typically, because I think it's such a foundational concept, that when you have principles, so you talked about a value as like a statement. So do you think of a good principle as typically it is a word, like a virtue, like connection? Or do principles ever have?
Oh yeah, no, we have like open the drawer is a principle that they use. A principle that I have, everything is an iteration, is a principle that we use. What are you curious about is a principle that we use. So there's all sort. Embrace intensity is a principle we use. So it can be it's named so that it's remembered.
Yeah.
And it inspires action.
Yeah.
And connection is just one of those things that does that. Connection and it's not connection, it's connection.
Cool.
Yeah.
So what are your principles?
So I just named embrace intensity, connection. Everything is an iteration, loving accountability, and what are you curious about? They change names from time to time, but generally that's what they are.
I have a fun experiment that I'll often do with people that I find is a more pragmatic touch point to tap into principles or values, whatever they are. But it's, if I were to ask someone, like for anyone who's listening to this, think about the last time in your life where you were operating at like your absolute peak, like you were having the most fun, max enjoyment, max contribution.
Yeah.
And if you look at that moment in your life, I guarantee you that your values or your principles were being expressed. Perhaps not all of them, but that if you just go back into that moment,
that's so fucking cool.
Rather than kind of like getting theoretical about like what they could be, you just look at like, well, what was being expressed in that moment, and you just see that any of those key moments, pivotal moments in your life, like your values were just being expressed. Right. It's like a fun way to.
Yeah. So I'm doing it in my mind. If you like look, I looked away and I like did the process, and I think about all those moments, and I was connected, and I was embracing an intensity, and I was not trying to get it perfect. So everything was an iteration.
And there's a corollary, which is if you look at the worst moments of your life, your values are often suppressed in those moments as well. And so it's like another way where it doesn't just have to be the peaks, but the valleys as well.
I'm checking it out. Valleys are a long time ago. But let me. Yeah, that tracks. Oh wow, that totally tracks.
Cool.
Yeah, that's a really cool. May I use that?
Of course. Oh yeah, absolutely. Peaks and valleys.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah,
Love it. Yeah,
absolutely. All right, so we've talked about the aversion to things. We've talked about principles and values as a pathway to make better decisions. And then, what I'd really love to touch on here is just to get your take on a little more deeply, like what is the value of emotions and developing a more fluid relationship with the emotions to make clearer, kind of more honest decisions?
Yeah, so we have a course called the Great Decisions course.
Yeah.
And one of the things that what people don't understand, they're like, I think I read this testimony once where they were like, I came in expecting to make better decisions, and what I got was emotional clarity. And that makes great decisions. So if you think about that thing I was saying about all of our decisions are emotional,
sure,
it means that we are making decisions to feel some way or to not feel. We think we're making a logical decision, but the logic is all constructed instead of to build a bridge to feel a certain way, right? I've used all this logic to construct a bridge. I've used all this logic to construct that I feel like a winner or whatever the thing I want to feel like is or not feel like is. And so if you love all the emotions, then you make really clear decisions. If you're like, I have no problem feeling like a failure. I have no problem. I love feeling like a failure. I love feeling angry. I love feeling sad. If you actually have that deep embrace of all those emotions where it's like, I'm not avoiding any of this stuff, that all this stuff is totally valuable and teaches me, and I learn, and it actually is just another sensation moving through my body that I can find pleasure in, then you're like, your emotions, your decisions are super clear, just super clear.
So then let's just double click on that. Like, how do you start to welcome all of your emotions and even enjoy them?
Yeah, so there's a lot of steps actually to get there. And so I'll just say this for anybody who's listening, jumping to just try to love them often won't work.
Sure.
So it's a Pollyannish. We've all met that kid in college who's like, everything's great. Oh, it's wonderful. Oh, it's good. It's like, so that won't work. The first step typically is to understand that if you have an emotion that you feel like is oppressing you, that it's really hard to welcome or love it. So you have to get out of that relationship. That's one of the things to do. The second thing to do is get really curious about the emotion. So typically we have an emotion.
Can I actually invite you to go back on step one and take a little more time there?
Yeah.
Because I think that for me, I think that, shifting that ecology with the emotions of like thinking that it's damaging us or it's against us is like so big for me. And so I'm curious, like, could you say more about how you start to identify the true intention of emotion or purpose, like shift that kind of relationship where
that happens eventually. Yeah. But the first step is just to understand that it can't oppress you. Like it's to dominate the emotion. It's like get really angry at it. It's just to see that you have choice, that you're not actually oppressed. So for instance, this happens for a lot of the people that we work with is they were told that they couldn't get angry. As an example. So either they told themselves that because they had like a violent parent or an emotionally abusive parent, or all the love was removed from them when they got angry. And so they went to a whole bunch of things, but what they can't do is get angry. And they feel like when they have that anger, they've done something wrong, that they feel ashamed of it. And if they can just basically see, oh, anger is not an oppressor. That anger is actually care and love. And I might have to get really pissed to do that. And usually anger is a great way to see that something's not oppressing you, is to dominate it just one time. And then you're, oh, okay. Because for instance, if you look at Gandhi couldn't treat the British Empire the way he treated it if he actually thought that they could oppress him. You can't love something that you feel like oppresses you. It's really, really difficult. So that's the first stage. And then you don't have to worry about the wisdom of it because that just shows up. The second stage is just a deep curiosity of it. So typically this emotion rises and I don't want to feel it, so I jump on my phone. This emotion rises and I don't want to feel it, so I get angry at somebody, whatever my reaction is. But if I ask somebody, that thing that you're avoiding, where is it in your body? What color is it? How does it move? Where is it densest in your body? And we know now that you can take heat pictures of people with emotional experiences, and they have different heat maps for different emotions. So we get sensations in our body. So it's to get really curious about the emotion. So if, like think about it like a little kid picking up a frog and going, what's going on with this frog, and smelling it, and and then like watching it. It's like nobody does that with their emotional experience. It's just like, I want it or I want it gone. But nobody's totally ever like, what is that thing actually? And so that is another step. And then another step is, playing experiments with it. Well, so if I tell this emotion to go away, how does it react? If I tell this emotion, if I sing show tunes to this emotion, how does it react? If I distract this emotion, how does it react? If I hug this emotion, how does it react? And so you just run some experiments, and then that actually teaches you, because at some point you realize that the emotion, if you react to it in a loving, welcoming way, the emotion changes. That the discomfort of so many emotions, if not all of them, is the resistance to them, not the emotion themselves. It's like going to the bathroom. Going to the bathroom is not uncomfortable. Resist it, it's really, really uncomfortable. And that's similar with an emotional experience. Yeah. And then after that, then you start to see the wisdom of what the emotion's actually doing. Oh, when I'm angry like that, I need to draw a boundary. That's what it's telling me. Yeah. Oh, when I'm that anxious, it's telling me that there's a way I'm not taking care of myself. Or it's telling me I'm actually really fucking excited and I am not allowing myself to feel that excitement. Right? So, and then that all becomes apparent later. But emotions, trying to get the mind involved in the emotional, the only thing that you need to convince the mind of in an emotional experience is to just shut the fuck up. Because the mind trying to understand it is the opposite of feeling it. Yeah. The mind deciding what's a good emotion, what's a bad emotion, or when to have the emotion or when not, like that all really gets in the way. Your body is the thing that knows the emotional experience.
And so I'm curious, as an access point to start to run experiments. So my exposure to somatic work was really kind of natural, just through sitting in men's groups and just getting weird. Like, what do you feel in your body? And let's give it a voice, and scream it into a pillow, like whatever, and kind of figuring out what seemed to resonate. And so I'm curious for you, do you dabble in like parts work, or like what's the most efficient way to connect with an emotion and start to run those types of experiments of like, what does it do when I listen to it or hug it or all those different things?
We have a thing, we give it out for free on our website called Emotional Inquiry, and we have a podcast on it, and that's the most accessible, easy to use tool. Yeah. So we'll use that, and anybody can download it. And it's just like this quick visualization, the 10-minute visualization. Oftentimes, and the other thing that's really, really useful is expression. So when we're doing the Great Decisions course, there's places where we get to express it, where people get to express the emotion, and then there's emotional inquiry that they're actually doing every day.
What would be some of your favorite questions in emotional inquiry?
Where does the emotion, the sensation of the emotion end and you begin?
What was that? Hold on, let me.
What does the sensation look like if you're in the inside of the emotion? Instead of looking at it from the outside, what is it to step into the center of it and look out?
I feel weird things in my body.
Yeah.
Considering that.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. Because it's creating both space and depersonalization on the emotion, but it's also creating deeper connection with the emotion.
Can you keep going? Actually, if you're open to it, like I'm loving the questions.
Yeah. Well, you're somatically fluid, so me doing it quickly will work for you. But my fear would be that most people in the audience, they couldn't process it as quickly as I would throw down. But I'll just do 3 more. What color is it? Is a great one. Where is it densest in your body? Is a great one. How is it moving? They're all moving. Even at the most dense part of an emotional experience, there's movement. And is that like a vibration, or is that like what's the movement and how does the movement differ from the center of the emotion to the edge of the emotional experience?
Beautiful. Yeah. It begets curiosity.
Yeah, right? Exactly. Wonder even.
Yeah. Someone once said to me in a sauna, they said, it's very difficult to be afraid and curious at the same time.
Oh, it's impossible. It is impossible to have wonder. You can be curious and scared, but there's this great experiment that we do and so you can just do it, like close your eyes for a minute and imagine you're running from a tiger. Yeah. You're in India and it's coming after you, and you can feel it's landing on the ground, and you can hear it's snorting, and it's coming up, and it's getting closer, and you're just, oh my God. And now wonder how much does it weigh? You just
totally
can't do it. Yeah.
Wow.
And that's why what are you curious about is one of our principles.
Yeah.
Because if you are in wonder, if you're not in the knowing, if you're in the not knowing of something, your heart opens. Fear can't exist in wonder.
Fear can't exist in wonder. And you said something there as well about resistance, which is another kind of touch point that just brings me into a place of curiosity, is this idea that like oftentimes what I think a lot of people experience as an emotional experience is more so the resistance to the emotion.
Yeah, yeah.
And when I ask myself there is, am I feeling shame? Am I feeling fear?
Yeah.
Or am I feeling the resistance to feeling that thing?
Yeah.
And almost always it's more so the resistance to doing it.
Yeah.
And
that's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then when I get curious there, it's great. And so you talked about wonder. And so like maybe it's a good time to think about view, because I think it's just such a helpful framework. And so I'd love if you could introduce that framework and how you use it to kind of evaluate situations.
Yeah. So what I would say is that view, we use it as for the most part for how to communicate with people most effectively.
Yeah.
And it's because it creates a deep sense of connection in yourself and in the other person. And the acronym says V is for vulnerability.
Yeah.
I is for impartiality. E is for empathy. W is for wonder. And we have strange definitions potentially for them, or not what normally people would call them. So vulnerability for us is saying the scary thing that's true to you. That's vulnerability. Yeah. It's not weakness. It's, there's my truth, and it makes me pucker a little bit to think about saying it. I'm going to say that thing. That's vulnerability. It's asking the challenging question.
Yeah.
Impartiality means that I'm not trying to get you anywhere. I am following your river. I'm not trying to like dam your river or move. I'm not trying to get an outcome in this conversation with you. I'm exploring your world. Empathy means being with somebody in their emotional state, but not being in somebody in their emotional state. So if you're angry at your wife, I'm not like, yeah, I'm angry at your wife too. It is, oh yeah, I'm totally happy to be here with your anger at your wife or at me. Like that's fantastic. Let's do that. And then wonder is curiosity without looking for an answer.
Yeah. Let's double click on wonder for a moment. But I think that as we're talking about decisions, again, like each of these as, in a way, just, again, principles of like how to evaluate kind of like our decisions and what it is that we want. So wonder, could you say a little more about how to tap into that state effectively? Because I think about it again, of oftentimes what you talked about is like fundamentally a decision requires like discernment, deliberation. There's a perception of a loss or threat on one side of the equation. And so I'd love to hear like how you bring wonder in when there's potential threat.
Yeah. So luckily most of our potential threats are slow moving. So like, so there's time, which is good. But a really cool little experiment that we can do is pick and it'll help you experience the wonder or help the audience experience the wonder.
Great.
Pick something that if you feel comfortable, pick something that you're wrestling with right now and state it in a question that's a what question, maybe like having a third kid.
Yeah, the third kid is very alive right now. So I'd say it's like, do I want to have
So it has to be a how or what question, because closed-ended questions aren't.
Okay, I got it.
Yeah, aren't wonder.
Yeah. How can I maintain the abundance and freedom that I desire while also having a third child?
Yeah. And so all we're going to do is just ask questions back and forth.
Sure.
And they're all going to be what questions.
Yeah.
What makes it that you don't ask how a third child can make you more free and more abundant?
Patterned scarcity.
No answer.
Oh, sorry.
Questions.
Yeah.
So we're in wonder, which means we're not looking for the answer.
Great.
Yeah.
So how does asking myself, could you repeat what you said?
Yeah, I said, what makes it that you don't ask the question, how can a third child make me more free and more abundant?
Yeah. So how could having a third child make me more free and more abundant?
Yeah. What's the freedom that's found in choicelessness?
What is the freedom that's found in choicelessness? And
so what you're doing right now, that is wonder.
Yeah.
Your brain is like, I call it the 404. Your brain's like,
yeah.
It's the same feeling you get when you're watching a sunset or you're awestruck. There's like an awe in it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that what it's pointing to again is just that like the mind is just naturally programmed to detect threats versus like be in that space. So it's like even where I was like, I don't have anything to say, and I was like, oh, like, good, like that's where you're supposed to be, right?
Yeah, yeah.
He's actually just scanning for like what does the upside look like?
Yeah.
And like for me, it always shows up as like, do you remember like old school computer games like Myst and stuff like that, where you'd be on the corner of the map, but the map only goes so far.
Oh, right. Yeah, yeah.
And then you have to walk to the end, and then like the map gets bigger.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? And so it's like, for me, like that kind of wonder is like just doing that. It's like I'm at the edge of the map.
Yeah.
And I just like being in there in the unknown is kind of.
Yeah. Most problems are a context problem, meaning that you're believing in a context. You're believing in a set of assumptions.
Yeah.
And wonder allows you to question the assumption.
Yeah.
Oh, wait. What even makes it that one more kid is less free, less abundant, or what is more free than a 2-year-old?
Yeah.
Like, how could you not learn about freedom by having a 2-year-old in your midst? You know, so there's this, there's a fear that's creating a dichotomy, and wonder shifts that.
Yeah. I love that idea of one of my mentors is, I imagine you know Diana Chapman.
Oh yeah.
CLG.
Yeah.
And so like their whole thing is that idea of like most of our suffering or problems are not content issues of like something that was said or something that's happening.
Yeah.
It's all context, how you're thinking and relating to the thing that has happened or is happening.
Yeah.
And I so often find that that's true.
Yeah. That's the intellectual side of it. But the emotional side is, the heart part of it is I'm actually moving into wonder, that sense of awe with it. And so you can do the first one all intellectually, but without the awe, it's much less powerful because the transformation is only happening in one of your brains.
Yeah. So one of the reasons that I was so excited to speak with you is I really do think that you're a powerful force in the world right now, where I would say like two of the most visible kind of models of success and achievement in the world would be like Elon Musk and Donald Trump.
Yeah.
Right? They have achieved at the highest levels.
Yeah.
And they also model kind of like a modicum of leadership that, you know, has a lot of downside. And it's like quite like vitriolic. And I think that what I see in your work is just that you really showcase what a more soulful, thoughtful, aligned approach to achieving at the highest levels looks like. And like, you know, there was this extreme recently of Sam Altman talking about like you working with him directly and his entire team at OpenAI.
Yeah.
And so what I'd love to really focus on is like, how do you, this process that we're going through right now, like it has a cadence, even right here, which to me feels like really smooth and slow.
Yeah.
And I think about achievers at the highest level who are just operating with this degree of like urgency all the time, it seems. And again, that like so many of us just convince ourselves that this is what is required to change the world, to operate at that level.
Yeah.
And so I'm just curious, like, how do you make the argument that, again, like this form of, in a way, like slowing down and going in is like a tactical imperative and a benefit for peak performance?
Yeah. So the first thing I'd say is like on the Donald Trump and Elon Musk thing, I think there's a way of thinking that doesn't serve us, and it's I'll make it like a forest fire,
yeah.
right? So for 100 years, people thought forest fires were bad. That's really screwing with us right now. If you live in California or apparently North Carolina, like it's really, or is it South Carolina? One of them's burning right now, and or Oregon, or
yeah,
because we've been stopping these forest fires for an extended period of time. It's the same thing, and we said that's bad, and so we stopped it, and then that creates an imbalance. We've also said like the angry person is bad, but the victim is good, as if they're not in a, because I know if you know Diane Chapman's, you know about the drama triangle. And so, so we have this tendency to say, oh, this thing that is bad because it makes us more uncomfortable than this other thing. That's generally how we do it. And so I don't see Elon Musk or Trump as bad. I just see it as a forest fire. I see like, oh, the underbrush is thick, and this is apparently the thing that needed to happen.
Do you see it as ethical leadership?
I'm not a huge fan of the word ethics. Do I think that there is a great amount of like peace, joy, and contentment in them? No, I don't think that's the truth. Ethics, I don't know. Ethics again puts me in this place of right or wrong. Do I think that? But the more important part for me in this is that just that the calling, like saying one thing is good or one thing is bad, or ego, like ego's bad. That doesn't ever help me solve a problem. So I'll just like start with that. And then why is it an imperative? I would say it's not an imperative for performance, meaning that you can perform at the highest level. There's evidence without any of this. I don't think you can have a life you want.
Yeah.
And I do think performance is easier with it.
Yeah.
So the people who I see who get their success without introspection, without understanding themselves, without the emotions, they have to use a lot more fuel.
Yeah.
The fuel is a lot dirtier, and they don't ever end up satisfied. And they're constantly acting out in such a way that's creating a tremendous amount of drama around them, and a lot of hatred. And there's a lot of, density in their lives, and they're not happy people.
Yeah.
So the question isn't, do you have to do it to succeed? The question is, do you have to do it to have the life you want?
Yeah.
And so the side benefit is that if you understand yourself well, then you're a lot more efficient, because then you understand how to enjoy yourself. And the thing about enjoyment for me is it's like the best measure of efficiency. Like if I have a fast car, it doesn't mean it's an efficient car. Efficient car is the one that uses less energy. If I'm enjoying my life, it takes me less energy to do the things that I want to do. And since I and you, I think both of us have had the ability to hang out with a lot of billionaires, what you and I both get to see is there's ones who've made their money, who are really content.
Yeah.
Great people, keep on building stuff. And then there's ones that are fucking miserable, who are constantly at war, constantly fighting.
Yeah.
Like it's just not correlated.
Yeah. I love where you started there again, of like what you pose there is that the question is like, you're not defending or debating whether you can achieve using, dirty fuel.
Yeah.
Obviously you can.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of good that has come from that, like unquestionably.
Yeah.
But it's just that if you're talking to someone of, I think that like definition of success, or you talked about like to live the life that you truly want.
Yeah.
And is it possible if you're just relying on the dirty fuel?
Yeah.
And coming back to that.
Yeah. Yeah. No, like that's where like it's absolute misery. And the coolest thing about it is that it doesn't take long to figure it out.
Yeah.
I've had folks who work with me because of my name or my reputation, thinking that it's all about getting performance. And then they find out what work we're really doing, and they're very skeptical. But it takes like one or two steps for them to go, oh shit, like I can now get so much more done with so much less effort.
Yeah. And so, I think again, like probably one of my top 5 recommended books is The Surrender Experiment, like Michael Singer. And it's like, there's just like feels that there's some wisdom in that book that's only like receivable by so many. I work with CEOs and founders too. And it's like, it's just only receivable when they see someone who's building $1 billion business while also doing that. It's like a lot easier to go and meditate for an hour when it's like, you know directly that there is a guy who is actively doing this and has created a massive, empire.
There's lots of them.
Well, that's honestly, I'd love to hear, like, who are your favorite examples? Who to you, because I certainly have some. The godfather of my son is John Mackey, and I always look at it. It's like, how much money you need to make? Like, when I saw your company for $14 billion, like, go look at John Mackey, right? It's like how much of an impact you need to have. Like, so for you, who are your examples of this kind of success, of like not just having an impact in the world, but really kind of like living what occurs to you as a principled way of being?
That's a good question. I noticed that there's something in me that's uncomfortable about it because I'm very quiet about so I'm very quiet about who I coach.
Right.
And so I don't, and then everybody else I could assume, like I could assume the guy from Boeing who then moved to Ford, I could assume that he has a lot of that, but I don't know for sure. So I wouldn't want to speak to it unless I know them. And if I know them, then it's more confidential than.
Yeah. Are there ones who are more public facing that you look at or who have inspired you personally?
Oh, yeah. One person who inspired me deeply is Charlie Munger.
Cool.
I love reading his work and the way he looks at it, and it's like intellectually so profound.
Yeah.
Emotionally not so much, but intellectually like deeply profound, and I really love his work. There was also, I think there was a book named Maverick, and it was a CEO of a meat company in Brazil,
cool,
if I have it right. And he was the earliest person that was running a company in this like really unique way, open salary. Everybody knew each other's salaries in like a very transparent way. Also I love the principled way in which Bridgewater worked, and don't agree with all of it, but definitely there was some great stuff there. And then if you want to look at unique ways of running the business, I think Reinventing Organizations has a list. Have you ever read the book?
No, I don't know it.
That's a great book. They basically talk about human development, and when a consciousness gets to a certain level, this is how they run organizations.
Cool.
And it's a great book. And again, don't agree with all of it, but there's a lot of examples in there as well.
Yeah.
And The Everyone Culture by as a Harvard guy is another book that has a lot of examples of leaders who have run their companies.
Cool.
In this way, with massive success.
Yeah. So, just while we're on the subject of kind of inspiration and like people who've had an impact, I'm just adding like a bookmark to come back, because for me, I feel like there are two decisions on a massive scale for people that tend to be some of the most difficult to make. So I'd love to move into practical about like career and relationship. But also, I'm just curious of getting you to this point. I gave you a hat that says "Holy shit, we're alive" on it when you got here. And you're with one of your friends, and I was like, you can only wear this when you're tapped into the holy shitness of your life. And she just goes, he's there. And so, but who've been the biggest influences on you and your work and your approach to really like personal transformation and leadership?
So I was raised to have authority issues. So I didn't trust any fucking authority at all by the time I was, 20 years old. So it took me a long time to even accept anybody was my teacher. So what I would do, which and this is what makes my work what it is today, is I would read somebody and think to myself, prove it. And I would run experiments to see if it was true.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I just noticed people do is that they read some sort of self-help book and they go, well, I don't believe in that, or I believe in that. But they don't actually go, what's the experiment I can run in the next 5 minutes or 10 minutes that can tell me if this shit's true or not?
Yeah.
And so some of the experiments I ran for weeks. And so that was what actually, and what I find is it's an incredibly useful modality to run experiments to say, what's true for me and how do I find out, and what's an actual experiment I can run to do it.
Yeah.
So that, and so all of the things that, like, all of our courses are just a series of experiments that people get to learn for what's true for them.
Yeah.
So, but with that said, and then the other thing is a lot of the teachers that I've had are dead, unfortunately, and never wrote book. They were pretty esoterics. But the ones that have written books that have been incredibly profound for me, outside of like the dozens of non-dual teachers, I went through this 7, 8 years of meditating in a room by myself and I worried about money, meditated, and read non-dual teachers. Cool. So I had a bookshelf full of them at a time. The most accessible one, the one that I talk about often, is Adyashanti, who's now retired. Mm-hmm. He's amazing. Hand in Hand Parenting by Patty Whiffler. The book is Listen. Most profound spiritual practice I've ever had is that way of parenting. I cannot recommend it enough.
How so?
It was the one that taught me about emotions. It was the idea in the parent is that that your child is naturally a connected human being, and then when it feels disconnected from 0 to 8 years old, it means it needs to have a big emotional experience, and then it'll get back to connection. So, kid who's like, no, I don't want to do that. No, I don't want to do that. It's actually just a kid who's like, I'm not connected right now. I need to have a big emotional experience.
Yeah.
So to sit in loving attention with my children while they're having big emotional experiences is what taught me to actually fall in love with my own emotions. And that was my journey into it. And it was lovely. And to this day, if I'm on a plane and a kid starts crying, I can stand up, I can turn around, I can look, and I'm like, that person wasn't allowed to cry as a kid. That person wasn't allowed to cry as a kid. That person wasn't allowed to cry as a kid. That person, they get all twisted by having to be confronted with that emotion, and you can see it on their faces. And so,
beautiful.
Me falling in love with emotions was all Patty Whiffler's work. Who's a tremendous woman.
Do you remember a moment in your life where you feel like you got that download, where you're like, were able to receive your kid's emotion like fully in the midst of an outburst? Like if you go back?
Yeah. I can tell a good story about when that was definitely there. I was in a Whole Foods, speaking to John Mackey, and I was in a Whole Foods, and my kid wanted the chips or whatever it was. Yeah. And I was like, yeah, no, I see that you really want the chips, but we're not going to have the chips. I want the chips. Just starts wailing and kicking and screaming. I sit down on the floor, and I'm just like, yeah, you want the chips. I understand. And I live in a somewhat hippie town. This little hippie bitty lady, 70 years old, comes over, and she's like, are you okay? My daughter goes, I'm just having my emotions. She just like looked at her and said, I'm just having my emotions.
Wow.
The woman just like, what just happened?
Yeah.
And I just thought it lasted like 7 minutes. And
totally.
Yeah. And I was just a full loving presence. I knew that at that point I had gotten it. I was like, oh yeah, I'm there.
Yeah. Like my callback for that again, it's like my discomfort with your emotions, because my son's only 7.
Yeah.
Is my own discomfort with my emotions.
Yeah, that's right.
Just like straight up.
Straight up.
It's like
exactly.
It's like there's no issue there. Like my discomfort. It's like it's just my own stuff there.
And now my girls are, 16 and so I get to see the outcome. We have I don't know if you've listened to it, but there's a podcast with my daughter and I, where my daughter's interviewing me.
Oh, cool.
If you want to see the result of Hand in Hand Parenting, listen to that podcast, because it just totally shows you what the deal is.
And I'm also familiar with Adyashanti, and so I'm curious, again, because you're working with kind of leaders on the cutting edge, right? Really pioneering folks. And how do you you're not like putting people into like pursuing non-dual states, like necessarily, but it's part of your own path. And so I think that what brings up for me, and I imagine like a lot of the types of people that I get to work with, is that their motivation to perform at the levels that they would like to will go away if they start to access those frames of consciousness.
Yeah.
What would you say to that?
That's what I would say. I'd laugh hysterically. No, not true. So what I found is that pursuing non-dual states is a very inefficient way to get to non-dual states.
Yeah.
That's one of the things. And so it's really common in our work that people find non-dual states, so we never talk about it.
And also it might be helpful. Could you just define what a non-dual state is for people who are listening?
Yeah. Intellectual level, non-dual state is the recognition that you are one with everything.
Yeah.
So so it's a place of unity, and what it allows you is this access point where you can always find a spacious awareness, or there's always access, or it's always there, some version of that.
Yeah.
And so that's and it is one step in a thing, and it's not an end. A lot of people think it's an end. It's not an end. It's just one more step in a journey.
Yeah.
And anyways, and it can happen. I would say it's our birthright. That is like, if we allow ourselves to continue to develop, just like we will walk at some point, we will be in a non-dual state at one point.
And so again, when I hear that we are one with all things, that if so many of us are motivating to achieve and do because we are not enough and will be enough when we do the thing, or have the love.
Yeah. Dirty fuel.
Dirty fuel.
It's dirty fuel. So if you there's this idea that like mice aren't going to do stuff. Like once I actually understand who I am, I'll stop doing. Mm-hmm. Makes as much sense as once a dog understands what it really is, it'll stop doing. Like dogs are going to do, and mice are going to do, and like they're going to do based more on their environment than they are their state. Meaning, you put 20 mice together in like a mice paradise, and they're all going to be active, and you put one mice alone in a hut, and they're going to be, there. So I think there is also some wisdom to it, meaning if you're running on dirty fuel for a long time, then you're running on adrenaline. When your adrenaline on a nervous system level, when your adrenaline goes out, then you go into depression and you do nothing for a while. And I don't know, I cannot tell you how many CEOs I've seen when they retire, they do like the 2-3 years of hanging out in their pajamas.
Yeah.
Because they're depressed, and then they're beating themselves up for not doing anything, which only extends the depression.
Yeah.
So that happens. And so there is something that they're like, oh, if I actually stop pumping adrenaline into my system, I might slow down. And on a nervous system, there's some truth to that. And at the same time, I work generally. I always make time for my kids. I always put my phone down when my kids show up. Mm-hmm. Or whatever I'm doing. I always make time for exercise and family. Yeah. Outside of that, I'm working from 7 o'clock in the morning till 10 o'clock at night. Yeah. And I fucking love it. Yeah. So I that's why it makes me laugh, because we're born to have purpose and meaning and do things. Like, kids don't go, I got to build a better Lego thing. I got to build a better Lego. What's wrong with you that you didn't build enough? Why can't you get more Legos? Yeah. No, they're just like, oh, cool, fucking Legos. Bop, 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 bop. And somebody just asked me that the other day. They're like, I know that you could retire. You're coming onto this scene right now. And like, what gives you the ambition? Mm. And I was like, I'm just playing with Legos, man. I'm just
following the enjoyment.
Yeah, following the enjoyment.
Yeah. Which I think, again, that's what I love about the enjoyment. And even just like you talked when we were talking about principles, that there's just you can trust that. Like similarly, like my access point is more values right now, but it's that if you were to live your values or your principles for the rest of your life to the best of your ability, if you were to fail at what you set out to do, what else could you have done? Right?
Right. Yeah, exactly. That's actually the way I experience life. And that's probably why I have a problem with ethics, which is like my life feels like a state of choicelessness. Mm. It's like there are some things that are like, oh, I want to do that. That's awesome. That's cool. And I'm doing it. There's some things where I don't want to do that, but I know I'm going to do that. I know I have to do that. Not have to, like I have a choice, but I know that if I make that choice, it's going to be misery. I've lived long enough in my principles to know that if I don't follow them, it's gonna hurt eventually. And so there is a feeling of choicelessness in my life of, man, there's just nothing. If I do anything differently, it's not being who I am. It's not following that call. And it feels like a call. It's like, oh, there's this call. Yeah. And that is the cleanest fuel so far that I've come by. And going into like an ethical, trying to be good, that whole thing distorts the call. I think the way it works in my system is that somewhere along the line, I saw the inherent goodness in myself and everybody.
Yeah.
Under stress, we might do some shit things.
Yeah.
But not under stress, we're like, there's just an inherent goodness in us.
Yeah.
And so somehow ethics takes me away from that call and that inherent goodness.
I think it's like, for me,
it's semantics.
Yeah, but it's also, it's understanding, like I use the example of Trump and Elon, and it's like, to avoid the idea that they are bad, of like some hyperbolic assessment, but that there can be, if my principles deem that an action is causing harm, to just apply like that these are my principles, but not because they are good, but because they are me, and it is aligned to express like displeasure or disdain for an action that I think is causing harm in the world, right? But it's just, again, I can trace that back to I must do this because it's for me and my own connection to principles, and not because anything is any specific way.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's how it works in me too.
So I walked, we were talking about how you live your life as this choicelessness. And I walked out of the house today, and I had been listening to some of one of your podcasts with Chris Williamson, which I'll recommend to everyone listening to this. It's an incredible podcast. It's really quite brilliant. And my introduction to you and Chris, I believe. Yeah. And so I said, here, what question should I ask Joe? And he said, what's like your life goal? So from hero, what's like your life goal? It's a good question.
Yeah. So I would say, this is the Lego set I'm playing in currently. So what I notice is that, humans are stressed and they're not enjoying their lives in general.
Yeah.
And so that is bad, because that is suboptimal for a personal reason, which is you don't learn as much, you don't grow as quickly, you don't transform, you're worse to your kids, you die quicker. There's a whole bunch of reasons not to be stressed and not enjoy yourself.
Yeah.
But on a societal level, there's a bigger issue. Societally, what it means is that people feel like they're under threat, which means they treat people like they're a threat. If I'm under stress, I'm going to treat people like they're a threat. And if you treat people like a threat long enough, they act like a threat. Yeah. And you can see this in geopolitics. You can see this in politics. You can see this in marriages. You can see this in the way that people raise their kids. Yeah. Is that they're in a fight all the time because they feel like there's a threat all the time because they're stressed. Yeah. And society and most thinking thinks about stress as, too much phone, too much work, a whole bunch of external things of I'm too busy. All those things are making me stressful, making life stressful. And they're contributing, no doubt. But the actual thing that's happening, I would say, is three. One is the negative self-talk makes us constantly under attack, makes it so that we are feeling stressed all the time because it's like whatever it is, 50, 60,000 thoughts a day just coming at us. And most of them negative and attacks. The second thing is a lack of connection. The longest study that Harvard ever did just shows that a deeply connected person with other people is a happy person, lives longer, has less, is more successful in life. Yeah. And then emotional repression. So like right now, if I said to you, stop feeling every emotion that you have to constrict your muscles. Yeah. And that is tension. This is what fucking tension is. Yeah. And so to have that emotional clarity and fluidity, to have that connection, and to have a different relationship with the voice in your head is the actual solution. So what I want to do is create a force in society that does those three things.
What does it look like? What's the dream?
So my dream is like a 300-year dream. It's not my lifetime dream. So my dream is that there's this place in Africa where when they have a whole bunch of rituals and ways of handling without let's not call it the religious connotation, but they have ways of handling different things that happen in society. So for them, if there's a divorce, or if there's a a husband and wife are having a problem, that is not a problem with the husband and wife. That's a problem with the community. That means that is a symptom of a community issue. And so the community comes together to help, and they have a ceremony, a healing thing that they do. My vision is that we live in a world where we have that those are prevalent, and that it doesn't matter what story you believe about God. It doesn't matter what religion you are, but we have these shared ways of like, oh, here is what happens when kids hit puberty that allows them to learn how to be a man or a woman in a more profound way. This is and so these are the experiments that can be run for someone to understand what's useful when they're starting their first job, or when they're transitioning work, or all the things. Because we've all been to a wedding that's healing. We've been to weddings that suck, and we've been to that wedding that it's like, oh my God, I feel healed in that wedding. I want to see that for graduating from high school. I want to see that and that there's these ways that we commune with one another, where we have a society that supports us.
Yeah.
And actually transitions. The thing about, we do this thing called Groundbreakers, which is, only people who've done a lot of our other work can do, but it's a week-long thing, and we've measured the results of it. Cool. And it's like reduction in negative self-talk by like a standard deviation, reduction in neuroses by a standard deviation.
Yeah.
And so if that's possible, then like, let's make 50 of those things and put them all over the world.
Yeah.
In those big moments of transition.
Yeah.
Where we can all feel like loved and supported, and it doesn't matter sex, color, creed, wealth.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that's not happening most likely in my lifetime, but I because you need a really strong foundation of incredibly principled way of living to start that. And then hopefully that would be my dream.
Yeah.
And like I said, it's a loosely held goal.
Sounds like a religion.
Yeah, it is like a religion. Here's where it's not like a religion is that...
I don't say that. I say that with a lot of love.
Oh, yeah. No, yeah. I can see that it would sound like a religion. The difference is, and so I would be happy to call it a religion or a cult or anything, actually. But the thing I would say that's important is that every religion so far is, except for maybe one or two, the authority is removed from the person.
Yeah.
So that, I think that's like a really important thing.
Totally.
I think it's also not like a religion in that it doesn't require a story. I don't want it to have a particular story, because right now what I see in religions is that nobody believes the story. Even if I am like the most devout Catholic, which I was raised as a Catholic, I'm not going to believe the entire Catholic story.
Yeah.
And the story I believe, the Catholic story I believe, is going to be different than the Catholic story that the other folks believe. And so for me, it's like I don't want the story, and I don't want for the vision. I don't want a story, and I don't want the authority being removed from the person. Yeah,
it's just empowering people to come back to their own understanding of their principles.
Exactly. Right? Yeah. But the community aspect, very religious. The ceremony aspect, that those are things that religion has.
Yeah. There's an interesting example, I think, to be pulled in the realm of men's work, where I spend a lot of my time.
Yeah.
And it's like this idea, if you look at these quintessential rites of passage that were kind of baked into society for so long, that transitioned our kind of egocentricity, or like focus on the self, into like a focus on like other in many ways, where like child rearing and marriage.
Yeah.
Which was like, again, I'm looking at someone else, like serving versus just focusing on myself. And like that those have been like pushed back like later in life. And so you see a lot of like young men who are struggling. And I got curious about like rites of passage.
Yeah. So amazing.
And it's so amazing. And I just like, so what is it? It's like, it's any experience that helps someone to transition from a set status in their community into another.
Yeah.
And like a new identity of like, if you look at like boy into man.
Yeah.
But just like you said, it's that the way that those existed in like early civilizations was that the status you were stepping into or the new identity was predefined.
Yeah.
And that like, I think that one of the biggest opportunities for like mass transformation is just that. It's where you can look at the value of a rite of passage to like shift your identity from like, I was this and now I'm this.
But not defined.
But self-defined.
Yeah.
And then even more powerfully, because it's like, because you can do that work on one of your courses, like on a Zoom, and it's going to be probably life-changing.
Yeah.
But when you have a group of people who are doing the same thing for themselves and then reflecting back to you the new version, it just stamps the new identity.
All of our courses are designed in that exact way, and with that group thing. And the other thing to say about it is yoga in America today, is it a religion? Like, it came from a religion. People are all over the world doing yoga.
Yeah, totally.
I was just in Thailand and they're doing yoga. They weren't doing yoga in the last place. Yoga is an example of the thing that I would want to create.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the thing about it is, you go into yoga class, you get to pick your yoga teacher. You get to figure out, do I want to believe in, does Om mean one thing to me? Does it mean another thing to me? And so I feel like it's far more like that is the place I want to go. But you have that community of yoga, you have that support group, and that's important.
Beautiful, man.
Yeah. I think I have to go in 6 minutes.
Great.
Okay.
Perfect.
Sorry to
No, you're good.
Okay.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I mean, if I have 5 minutes left of your time, like what I'd love to even just like start to land the plane a little bit on decisions. It's like, so what I've taken out of it again, it's like to make clear decisions, emotional fluidity. We can start there. You can come back into like feeling our feelings fully. We can come back into principles of like making decisions from a place that is aligned.
Yeah.
We can look at pursuing enjoyment.
Yeah.
What else would you say, like just to synthesize some of these major points that go into great decisions?
There's a whole bunch of little hacks, you know, like if I'm looking back on this decision 10 years from now, what would I be proud that I made? There's all sorts of like, there's dozens of those things that can help you get clarity in the moment. But the only other major one is a community of practice, you know, like the accountability of your men's group, where everybody gets to see the decisions that they're making, that, you know, that there's, you have other people to reflect. That's how we're, you know, big decisions. That's how we were built to make them.
Yeah.
In groups, not as individuals.
So as a way for us to close this, it kind of just came through.
Yeah.
But I'll just invite you to, like, if you can imagine it, a little experiment.
Yeah.
To use your lingo.
Yeah.
A big decision that the listeners, viewers are grappling with.
Yeah.
And so for that person who's taking this in, like, what would you want that person grappling with a really big, challenging decision? What would you want them to know or consider?
Yeah. I can tell you what I'd want them to do, because it's without having everything, you know, all the emotional inquiry and stuff in your belt. So I would want you to think about the decision, and I want you to think about a scenario where it went the worst fucking possible way. And I would want you to slowly visualize that entire process and feel every emotion that comes up, from your boss firing you to your wife leaving you, blah, 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 blah. Feel it all. And then I want you to think about the very best way it could go. And then do that in slow motion and feel all of that. Because once you've fallen in love with both of those things, once those things, just like the samurai and the Stoics and the Tibetan Book of Living and Dying helps you overcome fear by visualizing your death and decomposition. It's the same thing. It just allows you, if you totally feel the emotional states of both the success and the failure, the emotion becomes super clear, or the decision becomes super clear.
Welcome it all.
Yeah.
Yeah. Beautiful, man. So for the people who want to go deeper with you, with AOA, what's the best place to find you?
Art of Accomplishment is the website, and it is the podcast.
Yeah.
Highly recommend. And we have a YouTube channel, and I highly recommend either going to the YouTube channel or going to the podcast and just like going through and saying, this is what I'm wrestling with, and listen to something. Because it's not a normal podcast, and we're not interviewing people. It's we're deeply talking about a topic like being stuck or making decisions or anger or
I'll say, as a fan of yours, it also felt like in recent memory that there's a very obvious like up level in the quality of the content, like not just of there, but just production and everything that you guys are doing. And like, I'm just very happy to see what you're putting into the world, like scaling and getting the recognition it deserves. And so personal stamp of approval, check it out. Cool. And thanks so much for the time today, brother. Really enjoyed the chat.
Yeah. What a joy.
All right, y'all. Thanks for joining.
All right. Bye.